Hey, it's Patrick from J&P Cycles, and let's talk suspension for your Harley Davidson, specifically Fox suspension. Now, Fox is fairly new to cruiser suspension, but definitely not new to the suspension game overall. They've been around since the mid-70s, making all kinds of suspension, mainly for off-road related applications, but they've brought that extensive knowledge and tech over into Harley Davidson land and make quite the array of suspension for Harley Davidsons. Let's look at them a little more specifically, starting with the rear suspension. So Fox actually has a wide range of options for a bunch of models. We have shocks for baggers, Dynas, FXRs, Sportsters, and Milwaukee 8 Softails. And inside this range of shocks, you're also gonna have options, obviously, for length, but not just for length, for the spring rating. You can go with a standard spring or a heavy duty spring on just about every model. So if you're going to be riding heavy all the time, constantly loaded up, you might want to go towards that heavier spring rate. But let's talk about base construction. It's a 6061 T6 aluminum. Everything is machined and anodized really nice. Just a good piece to look at. But the base construction is a monotube with a floating piston. Why that's important is because of the other possibilities out there. Some shocks are actually twin tube design with a stationary piston in the bottom. And a twin tube design shock will have a low pressure gas in it, and the fluid in the shock will actually transfer between the two tubes. When I say two tubes, I'm not talking about next to each other. There's one inside the other, and that fluid goes back and forth between the two as it gets pushed through the valve on the bottom. It allows that fluid to mix with the low pressure gas in the shock, and that creates bubbles. Well, as that air gets introduced to that fluid, it creates bubbles, and it goes through at a different rate of speed. So you can actually outride your shocks, so to speak, and you won't be getting the performance out of that piston. Whereas a monotube design like these, it has a floating piston in there, a single tube, and a higher pressure gas that is kept separate from the fluid. So you don't get that aeration of the fluid, and you get a more consistent performance out of the shock. The other thing is the shock kind of tunes itself. So at low speeds, it'll give you a nice plush ride, but as that shock has to work faster, it actually will stiffen up and control it at a different rate than if you're going slow. So it kind of tunes itself. So even the base model Ifp Shock is gonna give you like kind of almost a self-tuning ride already. So let's talk about that. Base model shock is the Ifp. You obviously can set your preload here, really nice. They send you a nice plastic tool. Nice thing about a plastic tool, you may think at first, it's kind of a cheap tool. A lot of them send metal. Plastic was nice because you're not gonna scratch these aluminum shocks when you use it. And it comes in different lengths, like I said, different spring rates, and those are available for Sportsters, Dynas, FXR, and baggers. Across the board, you can get an Ifp. You cannot get the Ifp for the Milwaukee 8 Softail, but we'll get to that. So moving on over to the Ifp Qsr. It is the next step up from the Ifp. The Ifp Qsr is available for baggers, Dynas, and Milwaukee 8 Softails. It gives you a rebound adjustment here in the bottom. 3 clicks. They say, well, that's not very many clicks. What they did was they kind of broke it down and made it easier for you to tune your shock. So you can kind of tune it to a range rather than having to worry about trying to dial it in. They made it a little bit easier by breaking that down into 3 kind of chunks. And you see the Ifp Qsr here for the Milwaukee 8 Softail. It is a mono shock. That's why it has this big fat shock here. And you can see the difference on this one. It has some of the orange highlights in it. This is the RSD edition. They make the regular edition and the RSD edition. These are available for baggers, Dynas, and Milwaukee 8 Softails. Now, Sportster and FXR guys, there is another shock very similar to this that's also available for like will be the second step up, and it is an Ifp Qsr. The only difference being is the adjustment. You still get the same rebound adjustment down here, but instead of it being broken into the 3 ranges, you actually get 12 clicks. So you're gonna have to dial yours in a little bit tighter, but you do get an Ifp Qsr for Sportsters and FXRs. Now moving on up to the hot rod stuff here. You can see I have it over here. This is the QS3 Qsr. This is for a touring model. So you touring guys that want the best of the best, this gives you compression and rebound adjustment, again, in those 3 clicks at the top and bottom. The other thing you're gonna get here is this remote reservoir. You've probably used to seeing high performance bikes have these reservoirs on them. Basically what that does, it allows them to hold more fluid, which helps control heat and helps the shock perform better. So in your racier stuff, you're gonna see these remote reservoirs. It comes with a nice billet bracket to mount that to the bike. For the Dynas Qs3 Qsr, it's your standard racy looking reservoir, which is attached to the shock. And again, you have the adjustability on the top and the bottom. The one we see over here on my far right, this is actually the hot rod shock for the Sportster, and it is an RC1. The difference being, much like the Ifp, instead of having the 3 ranges, you have compression and rebound adjustment, but you have them in 12 clicks. So you don't have the big ranges. You have to dial it in a little more specifically. But for the Sportster guys out there, the RC1 is the big hot rod shock if you're looking to do some hooligan racing or just carve up some corners. So that pretty much covers it for the rear suspension. Lots of things to choose from here from Fox. Let's take a look at the front suspension. So let's talk about fitments. Basically, if you have a late model Dynas, fairly late model Bagger, or Milwaukee 8 Softail, they're gonna have you covered with either a cartridge kit or a spring kit. And again, there are some options across the range of cartridge and spring kits. Heavy duty or standard spring rates, and you can actually choose to lower the front end or keep it standard height. You don't really want that all off kilter. So whatever you do to the front, you kind of want to do to the back and keep things going smooth down the road. Now, the front end kit is a linear spring. A lot of times you see the progressive springs. That's just a different type of actuation to the suspension, and a lot of people prefer the linear kind. So I highly recommend, if you're going to do at least something to your front end, do at least a spring kit. You'll notice a huge difference. It's going to be more consistent, and it's not going to have so much dive when you go into a corner. And like I said, these are available in 41 and 49 millimeter, heavy duty, standard duty, and available in a 1-inch lower. The cartridge kit is kind of like the Cadillac here. This is the entry level with the spring kit, and the cartridge kit is the super nice piece. And basically what it does in a nutshell, much like I talked about with the monotube shock, it keeps the gas and oil separate. So it's kind of an asymmetrical kit. In one leg, you're gonna have your cartridge, the other leg, you're gonna have your spring, but it keeps the gas charge separate from the oil so you don't get that aeration. It's gonna kind of tune itself to the conditions you're riding in. So nice upgrade. They give you everything you need to do this. So you get that cartridge kit, you get some fluid with it, just get you some new fork seals, and you're gonna be on your way. As far as installations on these things, rear suspension for most bikes is gonna be really simple. On the Milwaukee 8 Softail, it's gonna be a little bit different. You just need to be able to brace your bike up so it doesn't fall down when you take the shock off. We have a handful of suspension videos. I'll link you guys to those. Front end's gonna be a little bit more advanced. You're gonna need a little more time on your hands. You can definitely do it in your garage. Just give yourself more time than what you give yourself on the rear end. And as always, if you guys get stuck, have any questions, feel free to hit us up and go work on those motorcycles.